Hi everyone, so this is Coach Fred and I'm going over the Algebra 2 test for those of you moving into Algebra Pre-Calc Honors. Again, my best suggestion is for you to have your test out and go over your answers here. So it says which value of x in the interval of negative pi over 2 to pi over 2 satisfies the equation cosine x equals secant x. I think it's important to know that cosine and secant is the reciprocal to cosine. And when we're talking about over an interval, I have to think about what that interval is. So if I'm here at 0, right, 0 radians, this is in radians because of the pi. Negative pi over 2 is down here because that's going this direction. Pi over 2 is going this direction. So I'm looking at where are the values going to be equal. So to be quite looking at it, the fact that these were the same but opposite made me think about the fact that cosine is actually positive in this quadrant. And so these are the reference angles. So the answers would be exactly the same. So I actually threw them all out to get 0. That was the way I did it. However, I'd like to look at this graphically. So if we're saying where are they equal to each other, a nice way of thinking about this is graphically, because where graphs are equal is where they meet. It's their point of intersection. So I actually went to Desmos and I was looking on the intervals. So I put both cosine and secant in. And as you can see, I'm looking from about pi over 2, because this is pi, right here, to right here. And you can see the red graph is cosine, the blue graph is secant. The only place they intersect is right here, which would be at 0. So there's definitely a couple of ways that you could have approached that problem. All right, let's move on. Number 10. Number 10, these are really important. If you walk away from anything in this unit, is being able to find the exact value. That's a value, a number, not a radian, not a degrees, a value. And so these can actually be challenging. So I'm going to actually skip A for now. I'm going to go to B and C, and then I'll go back to A. So we look at it, sine 4 pi over 3. The first thing I want to do is identify the quadrant that I'm in. All right, so I know that 3 pi over 3 is pi. So 4 pi over 3 would have to be in this quadrant. Then I want to identify if sine is positive or negative. Okay, so let's review. All students take calculus just as a reminder. And the y's are negative in quadrant 3, so sine would be negative. Okay, then I write it in terms of the reference angle. When they're in radians, it's usually pretty easy, not always, but usually pretty easy to see the reference angle. The reference angle here would be pi over 3. So I would really want to just find a negative sine pi over 3. Okay, so I'm going to use my first quadrant because I've memorized the values of my 3 major angles in quadrant 1. Pi over 6, pi over 4, and pi over 3. Okay, so we've got root 3 over 2, 1/2, root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. Hopefully you made that change in your note packet because I think there was a typo. And then 1/2 root 3 over 2. Okay, so we know that cosine is x, sine is y. So we want the sine of pi over 3, which would be root 3 over 2. It will be negative, so my answer would be negative root 3 over 2. Okay, cotangent of 3 pi over 2. This is a quadrantal. So with the quadrantals, I actually draw quickly. Quadrantals are the ones right on the axis, so we do need to know that 3 pi over 2 would be right here. So I'm just going to label my point. We know a unit circle has a radius of 1, so this coordinate point here would be 0 and negative 1. Okay, so tangent is sine over cosine, so negative 1 over 0, which means the tangent is undefined. Okay, but let me remind you, it was negative 1 over 0. Okay, cotangent is the reciprocal of that, and that's where this can be confusing. If I reciprocate undefined, you have to realize you got undefined from negative 1 over 0. So if I reciprocate that, I'm actually going to get 0 over negative 1, which is 0. Okay? All right, now let's go back to cosecant 7 pi over 6. This just tells me that I'm going in the negative direction on the circle. So let's see, I'm going to go negative 7 pi over 6. So that's going to be in quadrant 2. Why? Well, because negative 6 pi over 6 would be here. So I'm in quadrant 2. First thing I'm going to do is ask myself, it's cosecant. So that's the reciprocal to sine. I'm going to ask myself, is sine positive or negative? Okay, so sine's positive, so that means my cosecant's going to be positive. I write sine in terms of the reference angle. So I really want a sine of pi over 6. The sine of pi over 6 is 1/2. But again, my question is asking me for cosecant, so the reciprocal, so I flip it. So again, I always do it in terms of sine, cosine, and tangent, and then I flip it because it makes it much easier and I don't have to memorize another set of values. Okay, so let's do a couple more. Cosine 2 pi over 3. Okay, quadrant 2, because 3 pi over 3 is pi. Okay, so cosine would be negative in this quadrant. So that means I want a negative cosine. The reference angle is pi over 3. Okay, so knowing my first quadrant angles, my cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2. So the value here would be negative 1/2. All right, tangent 7 pi over 6. Okay, what quadrant am I in? 6 pi over 6 is pi, so tangent would be in quadrant 3. Tangent is positive in quadrant 3, so I write it in terms of the reference angle. I want a tangent of pi over 6. All right, from your review of the unit circle, you really want to know your tangents as well. So tangent pi over 6 is root 3 over 3, 1, and root 3. Make flashcards, guys. Get these. You need them all the way through calculus, so you want to know them. Okay, so the tangent of pi over 6 would be root 3 over 3, so 7 pi over 6 would be root 3 over 3. Last one, secant, 11 pi over 6. A little bit harder to determine the quadrant, but I know that 12 pi over 6 means 2 pi. So I know 11 pi over 6 is going to be in quadrant 4. Okay, secant is the reciprocal to cosine. So I'm going to be finding the cosine. Cosine is positive, so secant is positive. Okay, so I'm going to have a cosine in terms of the reference angle, pi over 6. I want a cosine of pi over 6. We know the cosine of pi over 6 is root 3 over 2. So this is equal to root 3 over 2. Okay, so I have to reciprocate that. All right, so that gives me 2 over root 3. The only issue here is we have to rationalize the denominator. Remember, you learned that in Algebra 2 and geometry. So I'm going to multiply both sides by root 3 over 3 to rationalize and get 2 root 3 over 3. All right, so that was numbers 9 and 10 of the test. Hopefully that was helpful. Have a great day.